The knock at the sheriff's door. The lantern flickered low when the knock came. Hard, hurried, like a fist against fate itself. Sheriff Thomas Caldwell set his coffee aside, hand drifting to the iron on his hip. Outside, the wind carried dust across the porch, each gust rattling the loose boards like bones. The second knock was softer, but no less urgent. Before the sheriff could move, small footsteps padded across the floor. Eli, his boy, reached the door with sleepy eyes wide, the glow of the lantern painting his pale face in gold. The sheriff barked low, "Leave it, Eli." Too late. The door swung open. There she stood, cloaked in black, a satchel hanging from her hand, hair windswept and eyes hollow as midnight wells. A widow. The storm of the prairie clung to her dress. Dust caked on her hem. Eli's breath caught. He leaned close, voice thin as a whisper meant only for her ear. "Stay with us." The sheriff stiffened at the words. The boy's hand reached out, touched the stranger's sleeve like he'd known her all his life. The woman's gaze broke, not at the sheriff, but at the boy, like his voice had cracked something within her. She didn't smile. She didn't weep. She just breathed out names she did not give. "Please." The sheriff pulled the door wider, eyes sharp. "Step inside, ma'am." The night swallowed behind her as she entered, bringing with her the faint scent of gun smoke and sage. The wind died at once, as if it dared not follow. She stood in the small cabin, lantern light licking across her face. Her eyes were rimmed red from travel, but her spine remained straight, proud as any soldier's. "Name?" the sheriff asked. Her lips pressed together, then parted. "Clara Ashford." "Where from?" "South Ridge. Homestead by the canyon." His eyes narrowed. "Long way to walk in the dark. My horse was shot out from under me." The sheriff studied her, silent. Eli tugged his father's sleeve. "Pa, she's cold." The boy fetched a quilt from the cot, wrapping it around her shoulders with a stubborn care only a child can give. The sheriff let him. Clara sank into the chair by the table, fingers trembling not from fear, but from something heavier. She set the satchel down. Its worn leather sagged like it had carried too many miles, too many burdens. The sheriff poured a tin cup of water, slid it across. "Start talking." She lifted the cup, hand unshaken now. "My husband, he's gone." The words fell flat as lead on wood. "Bandits." Her eyes lowered. "Ambushed. In the canyons." "You saw him?" She shook her head. "I saw the firelight. Heard the shots. By the time I reached him," her voice broke, but only for a moment. "He was already gone." Eli's small face darkened, confusion wrestling with sorrow for a man he'd never met. The sheriff leaned back slow, chair creaking. "And why come here?" Clara's eyes lifted to his, steady. "Because the men who killed him, they'll come for me next." The lantern hissed. Somewhere outside, a coyote yipped, carrying the sound like a warning across the desert night. Silence pressed heavy in the cabin until Eli whispered, "She can stay, can't she, Pa?" Sheriff Caldwell didn't answer. He watched her, the widow cloaked in black, sitting straighter than any beaten soul should. His hand rested near the revolver at his belt, yet something in her manner held his trigger finger still. Finally, he said, "You'll take the spare cot." Clara nodded once. But as she lay down that night, quilt pulled to her chin, the sheriff sat awake in his chair, eyes on the dying fire. He caught the faintest glimmer when she thought no one looked, her hand slipping to her satchel, resting on something solid within. Not the weight of clothes, not the weight of bread, the weight of iron. The wind rose again, rattling the shutters, and the sheriff thought of Eli's words, "Stay with us." He wondered if they had just let trouble cross their threshold, wrapped in black. Shadows over Dust Creek. Boot heels struck hard against the boards as the sheriff pushed through the saloon doors. The murmur inside broke for a breath, every eye darting to the black-clad woman who followed him. Clara kept her chin level, though her mourning dress carried the dust of travel. Eli's small hand clung to her skirt as though the crowd itself might swallow her whole. Whiskey glasses stilled. The piano cut short. "Evenin', Sheriff," the barkeep muttered, polishing a glass with hands that never stopped shaking. "Evenin'," Caldwell answered, gaze sweeping the room. Three strangers sat at a far table, their spurs glinting in lantern light, hats pulled low. The middle one smiled slow, thin as a knife edge. He tapped the rim of the glass with one finger, watching Clara as though he'd been waiting. The sheriff led Clara to a chair near the wall, Eli slipping close beside her. "Stay put," he muttered, then crossed to the bar. The stranger at the table spoke without raising his voice. Funny thing, his companions chuckled low. Dust Creek don't see many widows walk in the door past sundown. Clara stiffened. The sheriff turned his head slightly. "You got something he'd say and say it to me." The man leaned forward, shadows cutting sharp lines across his jaw. From his vest pocket he drew a small trinket, silver, tarnished, swinging from chain. He set it on the table with a deliberate click. A locket. Clara's breath caught. The stranger's grin widened. "Seems someone left this behind, South Ridge way. Belong to anybody here?" Her hands gripped Eli's shoulders tight enough to blanch her knuckles. The sheriff's boots echoed across the floor as he stepped closer. "Looks to me like you're carrying property that ain't yours." The man shrugged, sliding the locket back into his pocket. "Depends who's claiming." The silence that followed was thick as swamp mud. Every man in the saloon seemed to draw a breath and hold it. The sheriff let it linger before he spoke. "Drink your whiskey. Leave the lady be." The stranger tipped his hat. "As you say, Sheriff." But his eyes never left Clara. When they stepped back into the street, the night air pressed cool and sharp. Lanterns flickered in windows, the single road stretching empty beneath the stars. Eli clutched the edge of Clara's dress. "Why'd they look at you that way?" She smoothed his hair, voice steady though her eyes darted the dark. "Because they're men who think the world owes them something." The sheriff walked slow, hand brushing his revolver. "You recognize him?" Clara paused, then answered low. "I recognize his kind." The days that followed carved themselves into the town's bones. Clara moved quiet in the sheriff's home, cooking at the hearth, mending Eli's torn shirt, drawing water with sleeves rolled to the elbow. The boy followed her every step, laughter returning to him in small bursts. Yet always, she kept her back to the wall. One morning at the well, two townsfolk whispered loud enough for her to hear. "Strange woman, that one. Carries herself like she's been places no widow ought to go." She lowered her bucket, eyes fixed on the rope. No reply passed her lips. That night, Eli brought her a wildflower pressed in his palm. "You don't got to be sad all the time," he told her earnest. She tucked the flower into a jar by the window, but when she thought him asleep, her gaze stayed fixed on the canyon shadows beyond town. The strangers lingered, their horses tied outside the saloon, their eyes following every step she took. Men spoke of them in hushed tones, hired guns maybe worse. One evening, Sheriff Caldwell returned from patrol, dust caked on his boots. "There are skin questions," he told her flat. "About a woman riding alone. About you." Clara's hand stilled on the needle she held. "Then they already know." "Know what?" Her eyes flicked toward Eli, asleep by the fire. "That I've nowhere left to run." The sheriff studied her long, then leaned back in his chair, the wood groaning. "I can't shield you if you ain't straight with me." Clara's jaw tightened. "And if truth drags death to your doorstep, would you thank me then?" The silence between them stretched until the wind rattled the shutters. At dawn, a rider brought word. A rancher on the edge of Dust Creek found his cattle scattered, fence lines cut. No sign but hoof prints leading back toward the canyons. The sheriff saddled his horse, eyes narrowing at Clara. "This the sort of trouble follows you?" She lifted her chin. "It's the sort that never forgets." When he rode out, Clara stood on the porch with Eli pressed to her side, both watching the sheriff vanish into the rising dust. The widow's hand rested not on her satchel this time, but on the boy's shoulder, protective, unyielding. And though the sun burned bright above Dust Creek, a darker shadow crept with each passing hour, whispering that death was already on its way. Truths revealed beneath canyon skies. Gunfire cracked across the canyon walls, echoes sharp as lightning. Sheriff Caldwell ducked behind a boulder, dust raining down as bullets chewed the stone. His horse had bolted. He was pinned. From the ridge above, voices carried. Rough, mocking. "Ain't but one lawman standing between us and what we came for. Another shot spat sparks at his boots. Then, silence. A shadow moved behind him. Clara slid down the rocks, revolver in hand, eyes dark as storm clouds. She dropped beside him, firing 2 quick rounds. One outlaw yelped, tumbling from his perch. The sheriff turned, startled. What in? Her answer was another shot, clean and true. The canyon fell quiet save for the scurry of a retreating rider. Breathing hard, Clara crouched close. They're not after your cattle. They're after me. The sheriff's jaw set. Start talking. Now. She didn't flinch. Her hand tightened on the revolver, an old Colt worn smooth from long use, pulled from the depths of her satchel. My husband ran with them. That gang. Her words came hard, each one like a nail driven deep. He thought he could walk away. They proved him wrong. Shot him in front of me, left him in the dirt. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. And you? I ran. Took what I knew. Names. Hideouts. The payroll they stole from the railroad. She met his gaze steady. They think killing me erases it all. He stared, silence stretching. The lantern-lit widow who had knocked at his door was gone. In her place sat a woman of steel. You can handle a gun. I had brothers. Taught me young. She chambered another round, her movement sure. Didn't reckon I'd need it till now. Above them, a crow wheeled against the sun. Its cry cut sharp, then faded into the desert wind. The sheriff stood, brushing dust from his coat. They'll ride into town. Tonight, maybe tomorrow. They'll bring hell with them. Clara rose beside him, eyes narrowing at the horizon. Then let it come. By dusk, Dust Creek held its breath. Lanterns dimmed, doors barred. Folks peered from windows, but spoke no word. The air was thick with the knowledge that riders would soon descend. Eli clung to Clara's hand on the porch. Pa says the town's scared. She knelt to his level, brushing his hair back gentle. Bravery ain't about not being scared, Eli. It's about standing anyway. The boy's eyes glistened. He reached beneath his cot, pulling out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He held it out. Mama left this for me. Said it was Pa's once when he fought. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a revolver smaller than Clara's, its metal worn but well kept. I think it's yours now. Her breath caught. She closed his small hands around hers, the weight of the weapon settling between them. Thank you, Eli. The sheriff stepped onto the porch, rifle slung across his shoulder. His eyes lingered on the sight of Clara holding the boy's gift. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind sighing through the dry grass. Then came the distant thunder. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them. The earth itself seemed to tremble as the gang crested the rise, torches flaring against the darkening sky. Dust curled behind them like smoke from a funeral pyre. Clara rose to her feet, revolver steady at her side. The sheriff chambered a round in his rifle. Best get inside, Eli. But the boy clung to Clara still. You'll beat him. I know you will. She bent, pressing her forehead to his. Stay brave, little one. As Eli slipped inside, Clara turned to the sheriff. Her eyes burned, fierce and unyielding. They call me widow like it means weakness, she said, voice low. But I'll show him what it truly means. The sheriff studied her for a heartbeat, then nodded once. Then let's write ourselves a legend. The torches drew closer, painting the town's edge in firelight. Shutters closed. The church bells swayed in the night wind, tolling without a hand upon the rope. And there, on the dust of Main Street, the widow and the lawman stood side by side, shadows stretching long against the rising storm. The widow's stand. Hooves thundered down Main Street, torches flaring like demons' eyes. Dust rose in choking clouds as the outlaw gang swept in, rifles glinting, laughter harsh against the night. Sheriff Caldwell raised his rifle, firing the first shot. A rider toppled, torch scattering sparks across the dirt. The street erupted in gunfire, windows shattering, flames licking at the wooden posts. Clara stepped into the open. Her black dress whipped in the wind, revolver steady in her hand. She fired 1, 2, 3 shots. Each bullet struck true. Men tumbled from saddles, bodies thudding against the ground. Hellfire, one outlaw shouted. The widow bites. The gang fanned out, pouring lead toward her. Bullets tore splinters from the hitching posts, shattered the trough. Clara moved quick, rolling behind a wagon, firing back with deadly calm. The sheriff grunted, stumbling as a round grazed his shoulder. Blood soaked his sleeve. He dropped behind the trough, teeth clenched against the pain. Clara slid beside him, grabbing his rifle. Without hesitation, she levered a round and fired, striking another rider clean through the chest. Smoke curled around her face, eyes alight with fury. "You're bleeding bad," she said. "Don't matter." Caldwell forced a breath. "They'll break this town if we don't stand." Her gaze held his for a heartbeat. Then she rose again, fearless, revolver flashing in the torchlight. The outlaws cursed, circling like wolves. One broke from the line, spurring hard, shotgun raised. Clara's eyes narrowed. She waited, one breath too, then fired. The rider pitched backward, weapon clattering useless in the dust. "Widow," the gang leader bellowed. He rode forward, tall in the saddle, a scar raking down his jaw. His voice carried across the chaos. "Always knew you had venom. They whispered about you, didn't they? The Black Widow." The name hung heavy in the smoke. Clara stepped into the open street, revolver in hand, shoulders squared. Her shadow stretched long in the firelight. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." The leader laughed, a sound like broken glass. "Tonight I finish it." He swung down from his horse, spurs jingling, revolver gleaming. His men drew back, leaving the street to the two of them. Silence spread like a shroud. Only the crackle of torches and the whine of the wind remained. The sheriff, wounded, pressed against the trough, watching. From the darkened windows, townsfolk peered out, breaths held. Even the bell in the steeple stilled. The leader faced her, thumb brushing his revolver's hammer. "Draw." Clara's jaw clenched. Her fingers flexed once, then stilled. Time seemed to slow, the dust swirling in the lamplight, the torch flames bending in the wind. Then her hand blurred. One shot. The leader staggered, eyes wide, revolver slipping from his grasp. He fell to his knees, then face first into the dirt. For a heartbeat, the street was silent. Then Clara turned, revolver raised, and fired at the nearest rider. Panic broke the gang's ranks. Men scrambled for their saddles, spurring their horses hard, fleeing into the night. Their torches scattered sparks across the desert, vanishing into darkness. The air was thick with smoke, the acrid sting of gunpowder. Clara stood tall in the center of Main Street, breath steady, revolver still warm in her hand. The sheriff hauled himself upright, bloodied but alive. He stared at her, not as a widow, not as a burden, but as the savior of Dust Creek. From the saloon, the barkeep stepped out slow. Others followed, wide-eyed, faces pale in the firelight. They looked not at the sheriff, but at the woman in black who had driven death from their door. Eli burst from the cabin, running down the steps. "Clara!" He flung himself into her arms, and for the first time her iron composure cracked. She pulled him close, burying her face in his hair. The sheriff's voice carried rough but steady. "This town owes its life to her." No one spoke against it. The flames died down, leaving only smoke drifting skyward. The gang was gone. The legend was born. Clara lifted her head, eyes sweeping the townsfolk who now watched her in awe. "I'll not run again," she said, voice ringing clear. "Not from them. Not from any man." The sheriff nodded once. "Then you'll stay. Dust Creek needs you." And the boy's whisper from that first night returned, soft but certain, as he clung to her. "Stay with us. They say the desert keeps its stories, written in blood and dust. Some tell of lawmen, others of outlaws. But in Dust Creek, they whisper still of the night the widow stood tall, how she carved her place with fire and iron, and how the Black Widow became not a curse, but a legend.